about, let's repeat the story you initially told me about how you even found out about, Father Robinson being arrested in this case.
Yeah, well, go back to 1980. I'm a senior in high school. I'm at St. Francis and not a care in the world. Just finished all my sports, getting ready for prom, mostly worried about, hey, what am I going to do? Where am I going to college? No idea this ever happened. Had no...
You know what? I'm sorry. Before we even get, I'm just going to pull your tie down and kind of...
Okay. You want me to start over?
Yes, please. Sorry.
It's all right. So I had no idea back in 1980 this ever happened. I'm a senior at St. Francis, getting ready to graduate, go to prom, finished all sports, worried about where I'm going to college. Had no idea, really, or recollection of the case until I go golfing with a friend. It was an unseasonably warm day in April. And he mentioned to me while we're playing golf, hey, did you hear about that priest that was arrested for murdering a nun? And I said, no, what are you talking about? He goes, oh, this is a national case. I go, no, I've never heard about it. Well, sure enough, I get a call from a priest who I knew, who knew Father Robinson and knew Father Robinson's family. And he knew what kind of work I did. And he said, would you mind talking to the family? I said, no, it's not an issue. And they came, actually, it was a Saturday. I think he'd been arrested on a Friday. They came over on a Saturday, right here at the kitchen table, and asked me to take the case. I said, sure, let me go talk to your brother. At the time, it was his brother and his sister-in-law that came over. And I went to the county jail, and I talked to Father Robinson for about an hour. And came back, and about an hour later, just inundated with media requests. Now, my number at the time is unlisted, and didn't really have cell phones back then, not as prevalent as they are now. And all the big, outlets, NBC, CBS, ABC, the Today Show, they're all calling my unlisted number. So that got out somehow. That's when I realized the breadth of this case.
Yeah. I apologize. Your shirt, it's just your jacket's going to come up. Do you want to unbutton?
I don't
I
care.
just don't want you to be mad at me later.
No.
Okay.
I would never be mad at you
Yeah,
as long
we'll
as you
just do
eat
that.
those donuts.
I did. I had one. It was great.
Have another one.
Perfect. Thank you.
So you were Catholic. I mean, you're a member of the Catholic Church.
Yes.
But you didn't really know Father Robinson.
I knew him when I was in second, third grade at Christ the King. He was one of the priests at the church. And, maybe he came in and talked to us in a religion class or that kind of thing. And he talked to us maybe in the hallway at school, but I didn't know him well enough other than just to say, hey, how you doing, Father Robinson? Didn't see him from third grade on till when I saw him at the county jail in 2004.
So when you went to see him in the county jail, what was your impression? Was he scared? Was he bewildered? What was your initial thoughts when you talked to him?
He was a very confused man who didn't have a friend in the world at the jail, but I will tell you, and I'm thankful to the sheriff's department. They took really good care of him. They had him on the second floor of the jail, which is where they have a psychological ward there, a medical ward. They really took good care of him for the short time that he was there. Isolated him from the bad guys. I went there, and they even gave him a Bible, which was wonderful. And he had that Bible in his hands when I went and talked to him the first time. And I told him who I was, and he remembered. I think he knew my parents. He knew my parents better than he would me. And I told him that I had spoken to his family and I was going to represent him. And usually when that happens, not just in this case, but any case, His spirits rose. He felt like, hey, I've got somebody on the outside that understands what I'm going through, and I'll be okay.
You know, your job as a defense attorney isn't to even really know whether the guy is like, hey, I'm innocent or I'm not. You have to represent him. But was he there saying, nothing to do with this? I have no idea how they're even looking at me.
Have to be careful what I tell you because I'm still bound by confidentiality. He didn't testify either, although he did make a couple statements to law enforcement. I will tell you this. He always protested his innocence. So he always claimed he did not do this.
So when you started getting discovery from, the state, and you started looking at this case, what was the one thing you're like, this is going to be tough to overcome?
Sure, anytime somebody makes a statement to the police, on 2 occasions, back in 1980 and then in 2004, you as defense counsel, you always wish somebody did not speak. Whether they're telling the truth or not, it's easier if they don't talk to law enforcement. That was one issue. The second issue, when you're looking at the case, you're looking at what they called the blood pattern evidence. That was really the evidence that got them the arrest warrant to go arrest him. So when you first got the case, those are the 2 things that you're looking at. Okay, and then you're always worried in a case, a so-called cold case, who is going to come out of the woodwork 24 years later and say things that you may have no way of counteracting.
This was also a period where the Catholic Church, there's been a lot of abuse allegation going around. Was that entering your mind too? Is that, hey, there might be like an anti-Catholic Church bias out there?
Yeah, that was a huge concern. That may be the preeminent concern that we all faced, myself, Jack, and Alan, and Nicole. That was omnipresent. Is this jury going to look at this case, this evidence, removed from that scandal? And that's a big ask for a human being to endeavor, right? But that was a major concern. That was even a concern of why they even arrested him in the first place. Did the government feel that now the time is right because of the scandal to go and arrest him? And is the time right now to go and charge him and take him to trial? I wish if had to do it all over again, and this is unrealistic, but could this trial have happened in 1990? Before the pre-scandal, and what would the verdict have been then? I think I'd rest easier knowing that. And no disrespect to the jury, really. It's an impossible ask to separate what had happened, in the priest abuse scandal with this case, even though they're apples to oranges to one another.
Yeah. So you said initially all these journalists started calling you. But at what point did it really occur to you, holy moly, this is a worldwide interest in this case?
Right away, within a few days. My wife worked for General Electric, at the time owned by NBC. And General Electric, somehow or other, or NBC I should say, somehow or other, got access to our phone, which was unlisted at the time. And then all the other big stations got it. And they descended not just upon the courthouse, they came here to my home and wanted to do interviews, you're talking 48 hours, Dateline. And they all wanted access, not to me or Alan or Jack. They wanted access to Father Robinson. And I tell young lawyers all the time now, look, don't get a big head. It's not about you. It's about the access to the defendant. And of course, we shut that down, but it didn't stop them from wanting to interview him. Matter of fact, I'll never forget a media outlet wanted to interview him. They said, we will interview him, all expenses paid, anywhere in the world. Meaning, hey, we can do this in Paris, we can do this in London, any exotic location you want to do it. We'll pay for your trip, your wife too. We just want to interview him. And my thought was, hey, look, the government is going to know that this statement's out there. And they said, oh no, we'll keep it in our safe in our headquarters, and we won't release it until after the trial. I said, no, that's not going to happen.
Did he get out on bond?
Yes.
Okay, I thought he
Get out in bond. I'm going to say a week to 10 days later, maybe. Some really wonderful people put up their home for him. And they had known Father Robinson for a time, and they put up his home, and that's how he got out.
So what was that period like? I mean, this guy, everybody in the world wants to talk to him. I mean, what was it like trying to protect him?
Yeah,
just getting, hey, Father, don't talk to him.
Well, we of course told him, look, you're not talking to anybody unless we are there. Especially police, media. He went to his house and he was, as far as I know, undisturbed. I mean, he was a well-liked neighbor. He kept to himself, had no issues with anybody knocking on his door or calling him up and saying, hey, do you want to interview, That never happened.
So when you guys were thinking about trying this case, was the goal to show the jury that this guy's innocent, or was the goal to prove to the jury that there's a reasonable doubt that you should not convict him?
I would tell you it was more on the side of reasonable doubt. Has the government proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt? There was also the thought, Jack Callahan, who kind of a mentor of mine, he unfortunately passed away a time ago. His thought was, look, the priest collar says enough by him just having that collar and sitting there. Now, to Catholics like Jack and I, maybe that means a lot. But obviously that didn't carry the day with the jury. And the one thing I have to tell you, when first got the case, I'm 64 now, so I'm whatever that is, early 40s when I get the case. Now, I had been experienced at the time, okay? I had done my share of capital cases and what have you, and I'm not telling this to impress you, but I had been around the block, but not to this level. I mean, this is a hurricane. And I asked Alan and I asked Jack to come along and help. And we all had done capital cases. We all had been, in the middle, the eye of the hurricane, so to speak, and we all had dealt with the media, and I felt pretty comfortable with the team that was assembled. And then we added Nicole, who did a lot of valuable work as well. So that was kind of an aside. I mean, I was with two very veteran, well-liked, well-respected, intelligent, and great people.
Actually interested, there had to be some late sessions where you guys are all sitting around the table eating pizza, maybe drinking a couple beers, talking to strategy.
Absolutely.
Tell me about some of those nights.
Those were some of the best memories I've had. I'm talking with, it was kind of like I'm at the All-Star game. I'm a rookie, I've made the All-Star game, and there's these two veteran attorneys who are considerably older than me, but they were so nice, and their stories were great. They would recollect things that happened, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and they knew their value, quite honestly, was they knew some of the detectives that had investigated this case. And that was a pretty interesting dynamic. But just sitting around and talking to them and how gracious they were with me, even though I had asked them into the case, it was just a wonderful experience.
So what was the one thing initially, right away, you guys seized on, hey, we have to attack this? This is an area where we might be able to sway the jury.
Well, as I recall, I mean, you know, when you look at the case, you know, at least as I look at a case, I don't focus just on one thing. You know, it's kind of it's a variety of things you have to be concerned about. I do recall we were worried about just the government not doing anything for 24 years. And as a matter of fact, we had a pretrial suppression issue about, you know, the quality, the stale quality of the evidence, and nobody doing anything about it, and how the case should be dismissed because this case sits there for 24 years. In defense counsel, whether you like it or not, is at a huge disadvantage in a cold case. Because look, the government has had 24 years, at least in this case, to consider the evidence, to test the evidence. You know, we're running a race where the government is halfway finished by the time we even get the discovery. That's a huge issue, and that's probably the number one concern when you first get a case like this.
Now, you know, it may have been something I was watching on TV or read recently or something, but there's always that argument like, hey, and I think you kind of just touched on this because they've had 24 years to work on it, but hey, we don't want to draw this out because the longer we draw this out, we give the state more time to put together their case. We want the fast trial. He has a right to, so what was the thinking like? We're going to draw this out, or hey, we're going to push it right away?
No, I mean, the thinking clearly was, it was broad-based. You're never in a hurry to go to trial. I mean, you know, a continuance, Jack said, was always as good as an acquittal. But we needed time to have our own experts look at their experts and what they did. And that took a considerable amount of time. And it took some time in order to get funds together to hire these people, which we were behind the eight ball with as well. And, you know, the more time to prepare, the better. But one of the biggest issues was trying to remove, although it was an impossible task, trying to remove yourself from that abuse scandal. Can we keep going out and out and out? You know, but at some point, you know, the judge is going to say, hey, look, trial date's a set date, here we go. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of a broad based, you know, just broad-based consideration about, hey, look, there's a couple things, continuance or time going by is good for us. Plus, father was out. So it's not like he had somebody sitting, languishing in jail. If he had been incarcerated, you know, pending trial, different consideration, obviously.
Yeah. Now, something really interesting happened, and I think is actually within a couple months of him being arrested. So they exhumed her body.
Yeah.
Did you guys know about that? Did they tell you about this? For some reason, I thought you had said something, and there's something in the closing statement that we didn't even know they were doing this. They didn't even let us know.
Yeah, I'm going to be really honest with you. I don't remember exactly the timeline with that. Could they have done that without us knowing about it? Maybe. But even if they had advised us, what are we going to do? Sit there and look at it? I didn't think that was a big issue. If one of us said it in closing arguments, then it probably was true that we weren't advised, but I really can't recall. And I don't think it was, at least to me as I sit here, I wasn't offended by that.
Well, I really do want to focus on your closing statement, and I know you kind of focused on the forensic side of it. But was there something during the trial, and there always is, where, hey, Judge, we really want to get this into trial. Oh, no, you can't because of New York versus whatever. Was there something that you guys were hurt by because you couldn't get it in to the trial?
Well, if you look at the transcripts, we were fortunate. We had the assistance of some good people behind the scenes as well. People who really, lawyers that really were in the background but still helped us. I mean, you have to remember, I took the case pro bono. So did Alan. So did Jack. And so did Nicole. We weren't paid for this. And I don't tell you that, for any other reason to tell you we didn't have a whole lot of money in terms of experts. That was all donated to him. And we ended up having enough. We got lucky, and we were fortunate with the assistance of one lawyer who really wanted to remain anonymous, and I'll still honor that request. He came up with a hearsay exception, ancient documents. And without getting too much in the weeds legally, usually you can't bring up what things that are contained in a report, hearsay, a police report, it's hearsay. However, if it's over or past a certain time period, I believe it's 20 years, you then can use those reports. And that was a big surprise to the government, to the state of Ohio. And that allowed us to get in a lot of evidence that normally you wouldn't be able to get in, but with that exception, we got it in, and rightfully so. So we get that evidence in. The one piece of evidence I wish we could have gotten in, and I spent so much time on it. When Father Robinson was interviewed by police in 2004, he was...
By Tom Ross, right?
Yeah, I think it was Tom Ross, but Detective Forrester may have been there in and out. I can't recall. But this is 2004 now, not 1980, and this is all video recorded. And like any other case, like any other interview, the detective will go in and out of the interview room for a number of reasons. And one of the times he went out, Father was talking, and he was saying things. And we went to I don't even know what you call it, somebody to enhance the audio. And I'm pretty sure of what he said, but the court would not allow that. And he basically said, look, he was praying to the deceased to intercede on his behalf, which is not unusual for Catholics to do, to ask somebody to intercede on their behalf. He says, look, I didn't do this. Couldn't get that in. I thought that was pretty powerful. Whether it was going to be believed or not my call. I thought that was a powerful moment. Look, what if he said in those moments of loneliness, he said something incriminating? Yeah, I'm pretty sure the government would want that in.
Right, and it probably would get in.
Not up to me to decide.
Yeah, and I've seen that in other cases. I forget whether it was, there was certainly one, and I've seen Tom Ross interviewing him, so I've got all those videos. It's kind of hard to hear what he's saying, but you can certainly hear Tom well. But there have been other cases where, I forget which one it was, but the guy said, oh, I can't believe I got myself in this thing.
They make an incriminating statement.
There was a point made of it.
Sure,
in trial.
sure. Much like the DNA in the case. And I'm sorry to bounce around on you, but I think it's very similar. In this case, you had all her fingernails analyzed for DNA. And the government does that. They test it. We have our expert as well, but this is after the fact. We couldn't test it. They used all of the sample, so there was nothing left for us to test. And they came up with male DNA, and Father Robinson was excluded. Now they said in closing arguments and throughout the trial, hey, look, this is such a small, minute amount of DNA. But let's turn it around. If that happened to be Father Robinson's DNA underneath those fingernails, they'd be singing a different tune. And I'm sure that argument was made. I can't recall because it's been 20 years now.
Now, was the DNA, it wasn't a complete profile, maybe they could exclude him, but was it not good enough where they could, put it in, all the databases, CODIS, whatever? Because sometimes you see, well, it was an incomplete profile, we can't really compare it to other things.
Brian, I don't recall, but I know this. It wasn't him.
Right. They can definitely do that.
They excluded him. It was a male DNA. Now think about this. A nun who lives at the hospital with other nuns, gets up in the morning, goes to breakfast at a cafeteria at the hospital, sits by herself, and goes to the chapel. No interaction with a male whatsoever. And we have male DNA underneath their fingernails. If that was Robinson's DNA, government would they'd end their case with that evidence. Because look, somebody's being strangled from behind, right? According to the coroner. And I remember doing this to the jury. Somebody's strangled from behind. What's the natural inclination of a victim? To claw with your hands and your nails. And that was the argument. She did that. She did that to a man, possibly. And that man, his DNA was left under her fingernails. And you know what? It's not Father Robinson's.
Yeah. And I know the state argued that, hey, it wasn't somebody that manually strangled her. They put some sort of towel around her and used it as kind of a tourniquet or whatever, and
I'm no doctor. I'm no forensic pathologist. But what the coroner said in 1980 was somebody with large hands. And if you look at the photographs, you'll see the imprint of a hand or fingers. And I'll show you those if you need to. I've got them in the basement.
Oh, yeah. Yes. So let's talk. I know they kind of broke it down that you focused on the forensic thing in your, which I actually have it all here. Your testimony, the transcript for it.
I went
So
45
let's
minutes.
talk about- what's that?
I went 45 minutes. The longest I've ever talked in front of a jury.
It was about 42 pages.
I went a long time. I mean, not for this case, but for me. I like to keep it around 20 minutes because people's attention spans just don't, at least now, they don't last that long.
Yeah, and you can turn them off if you.
Yeah,
if you
not in
want
this
to.
case. This case, we were not restricted. The judge was great. Judge Oswick was wonderful. Didn't restrict us. And I remember back at that time, I did the forensics, you're right. But I kind of went above and beyond that. If you read the transcript, I think, I kind of melded the two together. And government didn't object, and thankfully so.
Yeah, so I mean, you start, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Father Robinson is not guilty. He's not guilty. And it's solely and simply because this table, the state of Ohio, has not proven to you beyond a reasonable doubt that this letter opener is the murder weapon. Their whole prosecution is premised on that fact. They need to show you beyond a reasonable doubt that that's the murder weapon. And if they cannot do it, then ladies and gentlemen, the ball game's over.
That's pretty good. Who said that? That gives me chills. I have not gone back, read any transcripts. I know I could watch the videos on court TV, as you know. I moved on. It took a while, but I moved on. But it gives me chills hearing that now, and I believe it. The key to their case, They were wholly dependent on proving beyond a reasonable doubt that that letter opener was the murder weapon. And I sit here today, I'll tell you, I'm not convinced. I'm just not convinced. You know, when I look back at the case, you know, one of the first things I looked at, you talked to me about first things. One of the first things I noticed, there's a pair of scissors missing. There's a pair of scissors missing. And it's not just me that thinks that. That's the detectives back in 1980 couldn't find the scissors that she would be working with. These are the nuns that lived and worked with her, couldn't find her scissors. She was a sacristan. In other words, she did things around the church to make the church beautiful or keep it in order. She had a pair of scissors that were never found. And that was always, always on my mind. Hey, look, where are those scissors? Could scissors have done this? And I kind of kept that, you know, in the forefront of my mind, but, you know, never could figure out where in the heck those scissors, where they came, you know, where they ended up. Now, the crime's back in 1980. You know, there's no way to investigate something 24 years ago, look for a pair of scissors in a hospital that has been completely remodeled. One afternoon, I'm sitting in my office. It's a hot August day, I think. Our air conditioner goes out. I'm still working on the case to get a call from my mother. My mother just wanted to know how things were going. And I told her, and I had at the time, just coincidentally, Miss Sutton's report. And Miss Sutton was the person that did the transfer analysis. And I've got the pictures in her reports, and I'm talking to my mom, and she's taking my mind off things, which are great. And the report fell from my lap onto the floor. And I looked at that picture differently when it was on the floor than I did when it was, you know, either at my desk or my lap. Kind of like you see things in a cloud that maybe you didn't originally. And when it fell on the floor, I saw a pair of scissors. I saw a unique long blade. I saw a handle. And more importantly, I saw a very round dot where normally a scissors would be. That night, I came home pretty excited. Yeah, it's a Friday. Most lawyers are out having a drink, right? I went, and I didn't know what to do or how to do it, but I went to the store. I got some tracing paper. I took a picture of the blood transfer analysis, and I'm no artist, but I drew a picture of that, you know, that blood transfer on the ulcer cloth, and sure enough, it was a scissors, at least in my mind. And I didn't think I was fooling myself. I asked maybe 50 people what they thought that was, and to a person, they said, that's a scissors. I'll be damned. So we get to trial, and I violated probably 5 rules of trial advocacy. And I took that photograph, which is now part of the court record, and before Miss Sutton, I did that tracing, and Nicole will tell you my hand was shaking. Normally I'm pretty calm in court, right? My hand was shaking because I didn't know what the heck was going to happen. And I asked her, what household item does that look like? And she, to her credit, said, that's a scissors. To this day, and I believe that was a scissors that, you know, imprinted that pattern on that altar cloth. Then I went back and just measured, because we had the coroner back in 1980 looking at the penetration wounds. They went 3 inches deep, 1/2 inch wide. Sure enough, you look at that tracing, you look at just an ordinary pair of sewing scissors like those were, it matches up, not just matches up, but it matches up almost perfectly. Could never find those scissors. And that was a problem. Not a huge problem, but a problem. So that was a big deal.
But let's talk about the letter opener. Why couldn't it be the letter opener? I know that the state said, look, there was blood on this at one point, and you guys said, we don't know that there's blood on this.
No,
But,
yeah.
that was their argument, that there was blood. It had been cleaned off, and this fits into the wound.
Yeah. How do you, first of all, I didn't mean to cut you off. How do you prove a negative? I mean, they say it's cleaned off because there was blood on there. How in the world do they know that? Number one. Number two, you had a paid expert, Henry Lee, ask the government how much they paid that guy to come in and tell his story. You know, that letter opener was put in that evidence with the altar cloth and the blood. Did they contaminate their own evidence? In other words, when they're packing up everything back in 1980, did that letter opener, cause that pattern? If indeed that really is the pattern. And I would tell you, look at the two patterns. Does it look more like a scissors or does it look more like a letter opener? And that's not up to me anymore. That's up, I suppose, now to your viewers.
Well, let me ask you this. So Terry Cousineau had come in and he said, hey, if you look at the holes in the altar cloth, it's an upside down cross.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see an upside down cross?
I did not. And Terry, I respect Terry. Terry, I would consider is a friend of mine. We've had cases, we go way back. I respect his work. I didn't see a cross there. Or if it is a cross, was she holding it when she was stabbed with a pair of scissors? I mean, to me, in the biggest part of this trial was not who did it, but what did it. Did the government prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that was the letter opener? Now, if that's the letter opener, changes the whole calculus from defense point of view. How do you explain that? You really can't. You're up against it, aren't you? But if that's a scissors, their case collapses pretty quickly. So my thought was it wasn't who did it, it's what did it.
And that's really interesting because Father Robinson, I mean, he could have taken the scissors, he could have stabbed her with the scissors and made the scissors disappear, right?
Correct, but if it's a letter opener, why didn't you do that? Why didn't you make the letter opener disappear? I mean, it's hard to believe that a priest who goes into the seminary at an extremely young age, I want to say he was a teenager. And he was like 12 or 13 years old back then. He's sheltered in the seminary for a very long time. He's working at hospitals. He's not some worldly person who knows the ways of the street. I can't imagine him killing somebody with a letter opener and not discarding it. But yet he keeps it in his desk for all to see. It just doesn't make sense to me.
So what about the exhumation? So, they exhume this body, they get the mandible, and voila, the letter opener fits perfectly into the hole in the mandible.
Well, we had an expert, Kathy Reichs. Now, Kathy Reichs thought she was a wonderful witness. She's a very good witness, by the way, very truthful. She's written a number of books. I mean, matter of fact, she has the show Bones, right? I don't know if it's still on. Do you know that?
Sure. I know what you're talking about.
Her testimony was what they did, they contaminated their own evidence. They put that thing in there to the point where they put it in and created their own evidence. You put your finger in some dough what's going to happen? Well, that shape is going to look like your finger. Kind of the same thing. They put that letter opener into the mandible, which was not in very good shape. I mean, how long had it been there? And created their own evidence.
I know I'm gonna kick myself later, but what were some of the other forensic concerns that you had? I mean, we talked about blood transfer, you know, the fact that, was there really blood on this letter opener? I mean, they say there was, because they had used different chemicals on it, and it is presumptive for positive for like blood. You know, certainly in reading the closing argument, you know, I mean, I'm like, oh, well, yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. So let's go back to the era that we are in when this priest is being put on trial.
Back in 2004 or 6.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing I have to tell you is, you know, at the time, most people don't know this, and I'll tell you now, but my wife had been diagnosed with cancer back then. So when people ask you, hey, look, this is the high point of your career, or, you know, this is, you know, the ultimate, you've reached the summit of the mountain, not even close. I mean, she, thank God, is 100% cancer-free, but that was swimming in my head for those 2 years too. You know, here I am, this lawyer, young, I'll consider it young, early 40s, got this huge case, you know, but you realize pretty quickly that, you know, there's more important things in life than a big case.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, because my wife was diagnosed with ovarian cancer.
Yeah, God bless you.
7 or 8 years ago.
How is she?
And she's good.
Good.
She just got her new numbers, you know, the annual blood test. And
I know.
the
It's,
lowest they've been that they've ever.
we share a common bond.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it was terrifying, right? 'Cause,
Mhm.
I mean, that's your life's partner, and she's everything. And then
Yeah.
one day they tell you, oh, she has cancer, and it's.
And that was going on, and that's why, you know, as big a case as this was, and as all the media attention it garnered, and all these looks you get at the Franklin Park Mall, like, hey, I know that guy, it didn't mean a whole lot. I was pretty grounded. So anyway, I wanted to get that story out, and I know she'll probably kill me, but I don't care.
Because that's interesting. So when you have, there's certainly lawyers who have giant egos, just like there's journalists who have giant egos.
Really?
And there might be, not me of course, and not you, but let's pretend there are. That people aren't like us.
Yeah.
And so there might be people that say, oh yeah, heck yeah, I'm doing this case, this is gonna make my career and whatever. So when you say you took this case pro bono, and Nicole and Alan and everybody took this case pro bono, why? Why did you do that?
Well, I know why I did it. Charging a priest, at least for me, would be like charging my own father. Couldn't do that. I'm not going to charge a family member. I knew it was a big bone to chew for me, but that's why I needed help. And I think the reason Jack did it, the same reason I did it. Jack's happened to be Catholic as well. Alan did it because I asked him to. He did it more for me, I think, which is wonderful. And the same for Nicole. So
let's go back to the day. Do you remember how long the jury was out? It doesn't seem like it was
they were not out relatively long. I want to say we did, part of the closing arguments were over the course of 2 days. Would I be correct in saying that?
Yeah.
I think the government's rebuttal occurred in the morning, maybe, and then the jury was out in the afternoon. So I want to say it was around the 3-hour mark, maybe 4 hours. I don't think it was that long. And I was worried, when I have a case, a big case, a homicide case like this, you kind of can tell, where the danger time is. Like if a jury is only going to be out, for example, 2 hours, I kind of know I'm in trouble in that case. That time frame kind of shifts based upon the evidence, but you kind of get an idea of how long they should be out if you got a chance. When they came back after 3-4 hours, and then saw him march into the room, kind of knew. I think Alan even told me, he goes, "We're in trouble." So you kind of know.
Okay, yeah. So you jumped ahead there, but I was gonna take you back to the time, like when you guys get the notice that, hey, the jury's back. Where is everybody? What are you guys thinking? Where's Father Robinson? What's happening? What are you telling him? What's he asking?
In any case that I have, I am pretty much, in solitude with my own thoughts in my own office. I can't work in anything. You're waiting. It's like waiting for a report card. It's waiting for a medical test to come in. Even though it's not about me, it's about my client in their case. Alan and I worked in the same building at the time, so I know he was in his office. I think Father was with his family. I can't recall where he was. Nicole was in our building as well. We just all went over together. Father Robinson may have been at our office. I just can't recall.
Do you remember any conversation that the three of you had since you're all in that same building?
No, it was pretty quiet. I mean, when you are waiting for a verdict, you're thinking like, okay, you're relieved in one regard because it's over, pretty much over. You're relieved, you got that going on. But then you also have the angst of waiting for a verdict. And then, you have other people, other clients who are asking you about their own case. I mean, it's been 3 or 4 weeks, however long the trial went, and you've put off things for about a month now. You've got that going on as best you can do it, but you're not there mentally. Your head and your heart are in a courtroom across the street. They're not with you. So you get that call, you walk over. Probably in my own mind, I knew we were up against it. But you're hoping, hey, maybe it's a quick verdict. I remember talking, we went up on the elevator with prosecutors. And quite honestly, got along at the time, still get along with all the people that prosecuted the case. They're good people. All the detectives. And I remember going up on the elevator with Dean, now Judge Mandross. And he made the comment, I don't know if he'll recall it or not, but he made the comment, and I'm paraphrasing, like, it's a quick verdict. We all know it was a quick verdict. Good luck to you. He was very gracious. He said, good luck. It's a quick verdict. And I made the comment again, they believe that's the weapon. It goes one way, if it doesn't, the other way. And he agreed. And I think we all silently maybe realized that the government was going to prevail given the time it took. But you never know. You never know until they walk in and render that verdict. But we kind of got an idea when they walked in.
Yeah, so talking about when they walked in, was it they weren't meeting your eyes? Were they?
That's part of it. And look, it's part of a kind of a experience thing, and kind of a little bit of a legend and witch doctor all put into one. And do they look at you? Well, that may not be the case because they don't want to get their camera or their face on the camera, and they're worried about that. So you can't really go by that, but you could tell just from experience, doing this, a lot, You could tell by the way they walked out how they were carrying themselves. You'd watch these people for 2 or 3 weeks. You don't know them, right? I'm not saying I know them, every intimate part of them, but you kind of get an idea of how they carry themselves. You observe them, and you get to be doing what we do. You get to be pretty good at connecting some dots, and you connected those dots pretty quickly. You could tell that it wasn't going to be a good verdict. And even Alan told me what I knew in my heart as we watched them came out.
And he said, "This isn't good."
Exactly. He whispered that in my ear. Yeah.
And then they said.
Yeah. Well, actually, they gave the jury form to the judge, and the judge read it. Judge Oswick read it.
And your thoughts when he read what he read?
To this day, I still remember that moment. You look at them. They took him away to the county jail. We went back to the office. Actually, we didn't. We had to meet with the media. We went first, and they did that in the jury room now. And all the media was assembled, and we made statements and took their questions. Then the prosecutors went next. And after that, we went to the jail to see him and talk to him about next steps and what had happened. And I told him I was sorry.
And what was his emotional state?
Not good. Not good.
I mean, he knew he was never going to be a free man again.
I don't know what he was thinking, but I can just tell you it wasn't good.
So, this was 20 years ago. What are your thoughts about the case now?
I have purposely not thought about it, not looked at anything, even though I've got the file here in the basement. I've retired from the practice of law. I don't think about the case, the verdict. I'm not one of these lawyers who's, upset at a jury, because I think I'm part of a system, just like the jury is. We're all part of that system, and you have to respect the verdict. I don't agree with it, but I respect it. What I remember most about the trial are some of the surreal parts of it. I remember, and you may not know this from the transcript, but I gave my closing argument in the morning, first thing in the morning. And I think we had some other issues to deal with the judge, so it didn't happen right away. But I can't tell you just the atmosphere in the courtroom. Now I kind of have a personal routine before a closing argument. I kind of walk around, the hallways of the courthouse. Usually it's empty. Nobody's at one of my trials, maybe except the media and family. But I'll wait outside until I have to go in to give my statement. And the reason is I want to be together with my own thoughts. Here I am. I'm going to make this, pretty big closing argument. I just remember the atmosphere. It was almost like a fair, a county fair or a game about ready to happen. You're walking into a game, and all these people are milling about and talking, and it just had that feel. And I remember a reporter coming up to me, and I was leaning against a pillar. I'm just waiting. I knew what I was going to say, and I was ready to go. I had, as they say, my game face on. And I'm trying to be nice, but I really didn't want to be bothered. And this reporter, a nice young lady, she was from, I want to say, NBC News out of New York. And it's funny how I remember things. And she came up to me, and she says, "Well, are you ready?" Are you ready for the biggest moment of your life? And I'll never forget telling her, this isn't the biggest moment of my life. And she looked at me like kind of like cross-eyed, like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, you wouldn't know this, but, you know, my wife, you know, was diagnosed with cancer a couple of years ago when this case started. And, you know, the big moment was when, you know, she was told she was cancer-free. This is nothing. I remember that pretty vividly. And the other thing I remember about that day, I gave my closing argument and I went to Wesley's. Is Wesley's even still open? I have no idea. It is? I went there to lunch by myself. Now I have friends. I'm talking about being by myself a lot, but I go to Wesley's and I hadn't eaten well, you know, so I got to get something to eat. I go by myself to Wesley's. I just want to be alone, and I got to be back to court in an hour and a half, and Alan and Jack are worrying about what they're going to say. I'm going to leave them alone. They're pros. They know what to do. Sit at the bar. I'm not drinking, but I sit at the bar, order a sandwich or two, and there I am on CNN. That was an extremely surreal moment for me. I remember those moments. You know, I remember the people coming up to me afterwards. You know, people at church or at a function. My kids played a sport. You know, at the time I had 3 kids that played a lot of sports and didn't know me and said thanks. Things like that. Moments like that really had nothing to do with the trial, but had everything to do with the trial. Yeah, I had a lot of those.
I think I know the answer to this, but do you have any regrets about the way you guys tried that trial?
Anytime you lose a case, anytime, you always will think, like, hey, should I have done this or should I have done that? And I think the question you're getting at is, should we have put him on the stand? That's, you know, that will be the question that you know, I live with. You know, should we have put him on the stand? I don't know. He'd already made a statement on 2 separate occasions. So what is he really going to say differently? What's he going to say?
Would they have been able to attack him and then, you know, I'm not going to mention her name, but clearly she had accused him of abusing her and assaulting her and being this weird sadistic ritual.
Well, she had done that to a lot of people, a lot of others. So I wasn't worried about that. I think if they would have gone down that road, that might have even helped us. And they knew better than to do that, I think. Can't answer for them. I mean, they're smart people. They have their own strategy, but I think they kind of knew that was dynamite for both sides.
I think when we had talked to Dave Yonke, and we're going to put him on camera, I'm sure you're familiar with
Tell him I said hello.
What's that?
Tell him I said hello.
Well, and he had said, you know, at one point the state, you know, they had talked to all the, I know they'd gone to Chicago and talked to Father, I forget his last
Grobe.
name. Exactly. And the state they had all these things. They'd talked to people about the satanic rituals, and it was getting so crazy that they're like, we can't bring this before the jury because they just think we've lost our mind or that we're making stuff up.
Yeah, I think they made the right decision there. I think it was a bridge too far. I don't think they could have proven it. And I think they were right in that calculation. You'd have taken them, the jury, in a direction I don't think they wanted them to go. I think they would have been lost, and quite frankly, couldn't have proven it. Yeah.
And I know I had a bunch of questions I was going to ask you, and I didn't look at it once.
Go ahead. Look, I'm retired. You ask me whatever you want.
Let me look through here.
You have another donut, young man.
I did.
What'd you say?
I want
I
you.
have another donut.
I want you to take them too.
I'm good.
here's a couple interesting questions. Were there witnesses that you wanted to call that for whatever reason you weren't able to call them?
I don't think so.
And did you get everything that you should have gotten from the defense or from the state in order to try this case?
Well, as I found out later, after the trial was over, documents were given to appellate counsel that we did not know about, were not aware of.
So let's ask you about that. So yeah, some of these documents were about this unknown black man who's appeared outside the chapel, and somebody saw him like running away quickly or something.
And can I stop you?
Yeah.
And we knew about that.
Okay.
We knew about that. In one of the calculations was, okay, you have this black guy, running around the hospital. You probably have a lot of people back then in 1980 running around the hospital. It wasn't like that in 2006 when this case was tried. Hospitals had, in 2006, more security than they did in 1980. Mercy Hospital also had a psychological ward, psychiatric ward. People could come in to a hospital without much security and go up to a room to visit their family. So to say, hey, there's a black guy around the chapel, well, there might have been a lot of people around the chapel, and there might have been a lot of patients, including psych patients, walking around. Who knows? So, to get fixated on one black guy outside the chapel without anything more at that point, we're seen as desperate by a jury if we bring that up. You need something more. And maybe, just maybe, that other evidence corresponds maybe then to the unknown DNA found underneath the fingernails.
And one other thing I just thought about, but there was this other thing that the state used, this footstep test, where so-and-so was, somebody heard these footsteps and they led to Father Robinson's quarters. I think in your closing you kind of touched on that. But
Yeah, I may have, but you're talking about Wardell Langston, the maintenance guys. I think they're working on an elevator or they were mopping floors, something. And he heard what he thought were running footsteps up above him. And I think his testimony was that, and the police would have testified, I think too, that they were trying to say that those steps went to Robinson's apartment. As I look back on it, if indeed that happened, if indeed, that truly is what happened and what they heard, could it have been somebody coming to him to confess their crimes? That thought crossed my mind back in 2004 when I got the case. But I have to tell you, I talked to an expert, and I don't even know what you call it, what type of expert, but he was a priest out of Washington, D.C., the Archdiocese of D.C., and he was an expert in canon law. And he said, look, if somebody comes in to a confessional, a priest can't even talk. We all know that they can't talk about what was said, but they can't even talk and say that somebody came in, let alone what was said. That thought crossed my mind, but then it's countered a little bit by his statement that he made to police back in 1980, right? But then he corrected himself and maybe realized, he had overstepped his bounds. I don't know. And we had long conversations about that. And unfortunately, I can't go any further than that about what happened in that regard. But that was always a consideration.
yeah.
That was one of the areas where Unfortunately, I couldn't tread.
Yeah. Because the state did make these points that Father Robinson lied about this, he lied about this, lied about this. He claimed that somebody came to him and confessed, and then he said, "Oh no, that didn't happen."
Yeah, I understand the question. It's a good question, and it's one your viewers may want to know the answer. I'm bound not to talk about it.
Interesting, but it clearly hurt him in the case. I think they were able to say, "Oh, this guy was lying about this. Why wouldn't he lie about whether he actually did this?"
You are 100% correct. And it was one of the areas where our hands were tied behind our backs.
Yeah.
And I can't go any further than that.
Right. So we'll just wrap it up with this. 20 years later, did the jury get it right?
I don't know. I don't know. I am asked this question periodically, by friends or people that are more interested in the case now than I am, quite honestly. They'll ask me point blank, "Hey, did he do it? Did the jury make the right decision?" And I tell them, like I've told you, I don't know. And that to me means there is reasonable doubt.
True. Whenever I think about this, and I'm always like, well, somebody has a mentality where they're able to kill somebody. They probably also have the mentality and the ability to look somebody in the eyes and say, I didn't kill somebody.
Maybe. But I remember in this very house, it was the weekend prior to closings. And Alan, Nicole, Jack Callahan were here. And it was a Sunday evening. We were at the dining room table over there. And the kids, they were younger. I mean, they were, really young. My son probably was 4th grade. Our daughter was 2nd grade. And the reason I remember 2nd grade is daughter was ready to do communion. And father came in, and he had to be part of our conversation, what we were doing. And he had a communion gift for our daughter. And I thought to myself, okay, it wasn't posturing. He gave it to her, I think in just a private moment. He talked to her a little bit. And I told Lisa, my wife, I said, I can't see him killing anybody. I just can't. Maybe I'm wrong. But I saw that interaction with my daughter. Maybe he fooled me, but I don't think so.
Yeah. That's all I got. Has this changed your perspective on the Catholic Church at all?
No, none whatsoever. Look, I'm not naive. There are bad actors in any religion. In a way, I'm as Catholic, I'm obviously sad this happened, and I'm angry that they would take a priest who did this, and shuffle him off to another parish to do this again. But now most of the priests I interact with, on a whether it's in church or I see them, they're a teacher of my kids maybe. They're normal, regular guys. They're in a way, this is through a lot of that pain and a lot of that tumult that went on for all those years, and still, quite frankly, probably going on. I think it's seriously disinfected, the priesthood in a good way, but all religions, are affected by this. It's not just us, but clearly we're the biggest one. Yeah, but no.